How's it rockin', Dween Nation? You're listening to the Dween Sports Podcast. We're about to get underway. But before you give us a listen, we'd love if you could like, comment, subscribe, and share. We are posting weekly sports content, and we want to build up the brand that is Dween Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy. Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Paez, alongside Genoa Agudelo, and we are here to discuss some NFL for week 12? Week 12,
wow.
yeah. Week
Yeah.
12. I'm we were just talking about college football and they're week 13, so I was like, whoop, whoop, whoop. Anyway, week 12 it is the NFL season, and this is it's getting hot in here. It's our bold predictions episode, and it's getting spicy and spicier and spiciest. You know the drill. Here at Dween Sports, when we talk about NFL football, headed into this week, here's the rundown. Each of us got 3 bold predictions for you guys. We are very excited about this one. It's pretty good. We got some good takes this week that I'm excited about. Obviously, we also got rapid fire NFL game picks, and as well as some starts and sits of the week for your fantasy lineups. So check out those episodes if you're interested in college football as well, which we are, as you can tell. We just had 2 episodes discussing college football, the CFP, reactions, analysis, as well as game predictions for this weekend's slate of games. But let's get into our bold predictions this week. But before we do, how you doing, Genoa?
Yo, Dween Nation. Justin, I'm doing good. I have my cup of milk ready. I have a nice glass of cup of milk here because, Justin, we're going to get spicy. But before we get into that, I just want to give a quick little unsponsored shout out to Buffalo Wild Wings because, with my cup of milk that I'm going to be drinking, there's going to be wings, spicy wings to go along with it. So I'm thinking in these next couple weeks, Justin, I might have me a little plate of wings, and, we're going to have to give Buffalo Wild Wings a shot. We're not going to stop. We're going to keep hitting them up until we get a sponsorship because, Justin, you and I know how to get spicy, spicier, and spiciest. So that's our resume here at Dween Sports. And there's nothing like some wings with some football there, Justin, especially tomorrow night, Thursday night. You got to have some wings. And so I'm excited to get right into it, Justin. I'm gonna go ahead and start because I have a Thursday night kind of prediction there.
All right, go ahead.
It's gonna get a little spicy there. Obviously, last week, with the Browns, they had a pretty entertaining matchup there in New Orleans, a high scoring kind of. And then last week, the last couple of weeks in Pittsburgh, they've been doing good as since Russell Wilson's been taking over. But these 2 teams, Justin, tomorrow night, Thursday night football, it's going to be a low-scoring matchup. I'm looking at the weather there in Pittsburgh. It's getting a little rainy. It's getting a little cold. It's getting a little snowy. My spicy prediction. I'm going to take a little sip of the milk, but I'm gonna say that it's a low-scoring game. And Justin, less than 20 points are scored combined. I think, Justin. I think that when you get an AFC North divisional matchup there, I think that it's all kinds of defense being played, and it is in the dog pound. It is in Cleveland, I believe, and I do think that Russell Wilson's going to struggle some in that dog pound. He played in Seattle. He played in Denver. He's never played in a up north kind of atmosphere, or obviously Seattle's up north, but like that northwest that's always so, I would say in was north, what eastish. It's always a divisional matchup there that they struggle in that AFC North. Literally, they hardly score every points. Even like last week, we had the MVP in Lamar Jackson, struggled all game, didn't score a touchdown to the end of the game. On the other side, Pittsburgh didn't even score a touchdown and won with field goals there. I think that's going to be kind of the scenario. It's going to be a defensive game. You have Myles Garrett on one side of the field. Flip side, you got TJ Watt. And it's going to be a rough and tough game. Cleveland has not been able to get that running game all year, really. Jerome Ford has struggled. Nick Chubb has come back. He has struggled. Not to mention, this is somewhat of a revenge game for Chubb because he did tear his ACL and MCL as well last year, week 2 against the Steelers. With the Steelers, they're struggling a little bit. I would say they're going to struggle a little bit. I do think that Myles Garrett and that front 7 is going to be able to get to Russell Wilson a lot. There's going to be a lot of punts. So if you got some parlays for punting, definitely go with that there because this is going to be a low-scoring game. It's just a recipe. You got Mike Tomlin. You got Kevin Stefanski. You got 2, caliber elite defensive players. They get sacks. They get pressures. And they're going to be struggling. And you know what? I like this. It's just kind of a recipe for a low-scoring game. So I'm going to say less than 20 or 20 about points scored tomorrow night.
Wow. Okay. I mean, obviously the Steelers, as you mentioned, they won on field goals. It was an ugly game. The offense really wasn't cooking, at least not enough to put up, a 6-point score as a touchdown. Cleveland, they've been exciting. They actually only scored 14 points last week. It was pretty underwhelming, but Jameis
Yeah.
still had a really good game. So yeah, I mean, this game is, as you mentioned, it's a divisional game already, so that's already going to intensify it. Then it's Thursday night, which is usually lower scoring. Besides a couple of games we've seen like Baltimore and Cincy, and a couple others. And then also, I was looking at the weather forecast in Cleveland. This is that time of year, Dwayne Nation, where weather can matter in some of these games. You're gonna kind of want some dome teams. Like you might want some Lions players or Vikings players or Texans players or Cowboys players because they're inside. This is not inside, and Cleveland tomorrow night is going to be in the 30s, 100% rain, 30-mile-per-hour winds. So weather might come into play in this game, which would be a downgrade for every person involved in the game. As for if you have to start these players, like, I'm not trying to start Russell Wilson. As for Jameis Winston, he's going to be throwing the ball a lot unless it's like crazy rain. I don't love it. George Pickens, you might have to start him, but you're not excited about it. And then on the flip side, the trio, even a quartet of just about Cleveland pass catchers with Njoku, Tillman, Judy, Elijah Moore. In this tough matchup, I one of them will get into the end zone, and you'll think, oh my God, Dwayne Nation, Dwayne Sports, you guys are wrong. Somebody did do good. Good luck picking which one does good. That's kind of how I look at it. It's going to be like not luck, but it's just going to be any, mini, miny, mo. One of them's going to score, I think, tomorrow night. But you're just not going to be able to predict it. So I like that take. It's pretty spicy, but it's possible. It's very highly possible, I think. Talking about my first bold take, it's also about points scored in a game, and it's about the Chiefs. They lost against the Bills, and it was a good game, and it's their first game of the season that they've taken the L on, and now they go and play the Carolina Panthers, though. After a really tough game with Buffalo, they get a light, snack against the Panthers, and I think they're going to win by 40 plus. I think this is like I'm angry. Isaiah Pacheco might return. He always runs angry, and he wants to get back on the field. Mahomes, I think it's time for something to happen. I think a big Hopkins day, Xavier Worthy, Kelsey. I think they're all going to get in the end zone. It's going to be a touchdown bonanza for the Chiefs, and they're going to win big time against the Panthers.
Yeah, Justin, that's a pretty hot take there. Looking at the Panthers, they've only won really one home game technically there in Carolina. They've had two home games. One of them was in Germany, which is the last time we saw them by them beating the Giants. But Justin, their only home victory this year was against the Saints, the lonely Saints, who I think they lost Olave that game. Derek Carr had just came back from injury, and that was the game I think that led I think Dennis Allen to be fired. And so they haven't really been a good home team at all this year. They got blown up by the Chargers. They lost by 10 to Cincinnati. They lost by 18 to Atlanta, where Bijan and Tyler Algier had great games over 90, 100 yards rushing. And then it's going to be a game that Mahomes and that offense is going to get their get back. I'm kind of debating if I should start Pacheco or Kareem Hunt or maybe both, because they could both have good games. And that Carolina offense, they're not good enough at all to compete with this stout Chiefs defense that they were up by 2 late in that game against Buffalo, and then Josh Allen with the dagger with a 35-yard or 25-yard run touchdown to kind of put the end of that game. And I think that was pure humiliation there for Kansas City. They have a lot of pride, led by Spags there. And so you know what, Justin, that's a little bit of a mild take. I'll take a little bit of a light sip of my milk here. For me, let's get spicy, Justin. Let's get a little spicy. I feel like that was a little cold. My take, your take, the weather in Pittsburgh, cold. Your take a little bit cold. I think we're both cold takes, but let's get spicy. I'm going to get spicy, and I have a feeling you are going to get too. We're going to go to Chicago, where Minnesota, Sam Darnold, Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones, they're gonna take a visit to Soldier Field. I don't think it's gonna be a good visit there, Justin. Looking at the Bears' last couple games, they've struggled. They had a heartbreaking loss last week to Green Bay. It looked like they were going to beat their rivals finally. Caleb Williams' first game in this, this divisional rivalry against Green Bay. He's going to get his first, he's going to get this win in this era against Jordan Love. It's going to be a new quarter. No, it doesn't happen. Carlos Santos missed that field goal. How heartbreaking for Bears fans. The week before, they get humiliated by New England. This week, Justin, my spicy take is they get their get back. They are mad. They got this pent-up frustration. I mean, they've lost on Hail Marys this year. They lost on domination. They've lost on Sunday Night Football. They just lost in different ways. In any different way you can lose. The Bears have lost. But this week, Justin, my hot take is they're going to get a dominating victory. They're going to sack Sam Darnold 8 times this week. 8 times. That front seven there in Chicago, they've had enough of losing. Eberflus, his job is most definitely on the line. He can enjoy his last couple games coaching. You can make the argument that, Justin, if they don't get this victory, he could be fired this week. If this offense doesn't hit, 20 points, he's going to be fired. So he is a, defensive-minded head coach. And you know what? This front seven there, led by Montez Sweat, Zach Pickens, Dexter, DeMarcus Walker, TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, and they're gonna all rush that defense, that offensive line of Minnesota, sacking Darnold 8 times. He's not gonna have enough time to kind of throw it around. And Darnold, Justin, he's been very underwhelming on the road. He's not the same Sam Darnold when they're playing at US Bank Stadium in Minnesota. And the weather's kicking in there in Chicago. It was a little windy, a little chilly last week. It's not gonna get any better. We just talked about it being Pittsburgh. Pennsylvania is not too far away from Illinois there. So that weather in that whole area is going to be storming. It's going to be brewing. And that whole kind of north, they're going to be getting a lot of weather, possibly a lot of rain, maybe even snow there. And I think that Sam Darnold is a quarterback that's incapable of kind of making a lot of magic. I do think that the running game is going to be shut down. And give me Chicago. I'm not trying to spoil, our rapid picks, but it might be somewhere I'm going, but give me that Chicago defense dominating 8 sacks in Soldier Field.
Yeah, no, I think that the sack count is pretty wild. I mean, that is spicy right there. 8 sacks would be big time. I do like the Bears' odds to get a victory this weekend. They were so close against Green Bay. They really had it. To me, they really controlled the game too, for a lot of it. Watching, DJ Moore was getting more involved. Swift had some good plays. Caleb Williams is moving around. So they looked a lot better after firing Shane Waldron. So that gives me hope that maybe the offense can get some points. Where it is can they stop Jay Jettas and Aaron Jones? And as you mentioned, Minnesota's offense hasn't been too exciting. Last week was somewhat successful, but again, against Jacksonville the week before that was horrendous. So they've been kind of on a downward spiral on the offensive end for the last month, and now their matchup in a division matchup. I think the Bears are mad. They just keep losing these close games, but I think they still got the energy in the fight, and I think they do pull off the victory here. And they might get to Sam Darnold a lot, maybe throw in a few picks too in this game. But yes, my next bold prediction is that Quentin Johnston's going to get 3 touchdowns against the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, Ravens are dead last against wide receivers. QJ has been only a kind of a touchdown target kind of guy. Obviously, Ladd had the great game last week, but this week I just see it. QJ is going to be getting in the end zone. He's going to, and I'm not saying he's going for 150 and 3 touchdowns. He's going to get like 4 catches for like 85 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's going to be touchdown, one other catch, maybe one other catch, and then a touchdown. But big day for Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, Justin, it's crazy. You might hit on this because these Chargers are heating up there, Justin. This could potentially be a shootout there in SoFi on Monday night. And, I like what I saw out of Justin Herbert in this offense Sunday night against Cincinnati. Obviously, Cincinnati, in my eye, is still a good team despite the record. But, I just like where the Chargers are going. And this is the Harbaugh Bowl, right? This is the Harbaugh Bowl. We haven't seen this since 2013 in the Super Bowl. I believe that was Super Bowl 48. Ironically enough, I just want to point that out. That was in New Orleans, which this year will be in the New Orleans. This Super Bowl will be in New Orleans. And, surprisingly enough, the Harbaugh Bowl is kind of back together. They haven't faced each other in some time. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh was in, college for the last 10 years, and so he's developed this offense unbelievably. Ladd McConkey had a pretty good game, and I think that this is going to be a team that's going to be taking turns. Ladd McConkey, obviously, a couple weeks ago, Quentin Johnston had a great game in Cleveland, and I do think that this is a game for him to kind of break out. He was kind of quiet last week. I think that he didn't really have all that well of a great game. Last week he was kind of quiet. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins had a good game, and Ladd McConkey did. And I think this Ravens pass defense isn't all that good. They did do a little bit better last week in Pittsburgh than they did the week before against Cincinnati. But Justin Herbert's on fire right now. I think Jim Harbaugh on this offense with Greg Roman, they're kind of getting things together. They're kind of heating up. They kind of gelled the right way. It's taken some time. Obviously their defense has won the games as well as their schedule. But I like that a lot there. I like that a lot. Quentin Johnston. Before I get into my spiciest take, I want to toot my own horn as well here. I had a spicy take last week where I talked about Michael Penix, being put in last week's game. And he was in last week's game, which I thought like, wow. I literally was like, wow, that's crazy. And the week before, Justin, I had another take where, I thought Kansas City was going to lose, and they could have lost if Will Lutz made that field goal. He got it blocked, and so I'm going to go for 3 in a row in some cases if you count that Kansas City, and I'm going to go with this matchup at Lucas Oil Stadium. We got the Lions and we got the Colts, and I have the Colts upsetting the Lions. Ooh. Yes, I still think the Lions are the most dominating team in this league. But you know what, Justin? Something comes to mind. I'm going to take it all the way back. You know me, I'm a little bit of an NFL historian. But the year, if you're familiar with the Legion of Boom, right? The Seattle Seahawks, Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, Brandon Browner, Bobby Wagner. They were having a dominant year. But then they took a trip to Indianapolis, right? Against, Andrew Luck. We all love Andrew Luck. He was a great player. But Andrew Luck torched him up. Obviously, that year, Seattle ended up winning the Super Bowl. But those are one of those losses that you look back and they're like, dang, the Colts are actually a really good team for beating that Seattle team. All the way now, we go back now to the future 10, 11 years later. And this is kind of that same mindset I have going into this game, right? It's Indianapolis. They need a win. Not to mention, at that time, Indianapolis was kind of fighting for their division. I don't think too many teams were good at that time. But Indianapolis was trying to win their division, and Andrew Luck torched them up. Looking at this time, I think that what we saw last week with AR, he's back. He is their franchise guy. I always thought it was a little dumb to kind of go to Flacco. I thought it was somewhat, smart, looking at what he did last week. But it isn't the right move if you've drafted this guy with the fourth pick, And I just think that now they have the momentum. They're only a game and a half behind, game or two behind my Texans in the AFC South Division. And they want to make a wild card run. And, it starts with this team, right? Looking at the Lions, they've had some, obviously last week they played the Jaguars. It was a defeat. A week before that, they beat my Texans. They could have lost that game. The week before that, they could have lost to Green Bay if that weather was all the way there. And they played the Titans the week before. So they've had, this, 6-7 game win streak where I think that now the Colts are hungry. They're ready to go. They want to win. They have AR back. JT's healthy, ready to go. They have the kind of, Pierce, Pittman, Adonai Mitchell there. And, Steichen cannot go, 5-7. I think he's a very tough head coach. Lining up with Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell's more of the vocal, loud, tough coach, where Steichen's more of the calm, behind the scenes, tough coach. In some ways, they coach kind of the same. They're very aggressive the way they play call. They're very aggressive on fourth downs. And this being a road game causes a little concern for me for Goff, just because sometimes he doesn't play all that well statistically on the road. But I do think that this is a shootout, so I do think that Goff has a great game. But I do think he has like a late miscue, right? He's hot all game, a late miscue. You can never underestimate this Colts team. I've said it all year. They're very solid. And I think that, now that AR's back as their quarterback, this team's ready to go. There's no doubt that he's going to be the starter for the year. So give me the Colts upsetting the Lions 31-28. A last-minute go-ahead touchdown by AR shocks this team.
That would be interesting. I think For Detroit to lose, it to me would have to come down to the Colts defense really stepping up, which they haven't really done, which makes me on the flip side, but it is a bold prediction. I think I mean the rushing game last week didn't to me look good for the Colts. Obviously AR looked good. He scored 2 touchdowns, but JT was like 20 something carries for like under 60 yards. It was awful.
Yeah.
The receivers are solid. Ah man, that would be a pretty big upset if you're able to pull that off. I'll give it to you, but that one's a tough one. I can't see it. I'm trying to put the picture cloud bubble in my head to see it. But yeah, okay, all right, interesting. All right, and that is spicy. I don't know. I mean, I'm speechless just about.
Yeah.
Going to my final take though, bold predictions. And I have a duel of quarterbacks in one game. I have Baker Mayfield and Tommy DeVito uh, dueling for 6 touchdowns and 500 yards in this game. Obviously, feel like there's some people mad. Like Daniel Jones got benched, which yay. But then some people thought maybe Drew Lock deserved to be starter, but they go with Tommy DeVito, Mr. Italian. But I think he comes into a game with one of the better matchups. He plays the Bucks. Malik Neighbors gets that post rookie bump. I think he's gonna have a phenomenal game. Throw in Theo Johnson to get a random touchdown, maybe Tyrone Tracy as well. And I just think it's going to be a great game from the Giants side, which we aren't expecting. What we are more expecting is the Bucks to have a good game with Mike Evans probably returning. And Baker Mayfield's just been balling. I think he throws one to Rashad, gets Mike Evans in the end zone, and we see Kate On continue to be hot. But I think it's going to be this game's going to be higher scoring than we think. So be ready to throw in your fantasy players if you're interested.
Yeah, Justin, this is somewhat a game that everyone's overlooking there. Looking at this Giants team, I don't think Daboll cares at all about a draft order or tanking. That's not his motto as a head coach. Obviously, the Buccaneers are trying to kind of catch up to Atlanta. With Atlanta losing a few in a row there, they're kind of struggling. They have a bye week as well. So, this is the Buccaneers' chance to get back in that win column after their bye week. And you know what? I like Tommy Cutlets. Obviously, he had he kind of stepped in the middle of last year. I think he picked up a victory or two, and then he kind of just simmered down at the end there. It was a little disappointing. But he fits that New York, kind of the Big Apple, the food, the cutlets, he has the agent that dresses like he's from Brooklyn or the Bronx or something like that. There's a heavy amount of Italians that good majority of Italians live in New York, and I think that Tommy DeVito comes from a good amount of Italian descendants, so he fits that kind of regimen there. And I always kind of thought there, Justin, that I always thought that he fit better as a starter going into this year over Danny Jones there, because we kind of already knew what we saw out of Daniel Jones, but what do we see out of Tommy DeVito there? Lining up and getting a number one receiver, Malik Neighbors there. Last year, they had a number one running back in Saquon, but he was already kind of out the door with New York not really confident in bringing him back. But what can Tommy DeVito do now with a star receiver in Malik Neighbors? This is going to be a guy that's going to be drafted really early in the first 3 to 4 rounds in next year's drafts in fantasy. And so I definitely like Tommy DeVito to see what he can do. This Buccaneers defense can definitely be thrown on. They can be ran on. They're not really below the pack. They're not at the top of the pack. They're just kind of in the middle there. So I'm excited to see what he can do there. And I in some ways, Justin, as spicy as that take can be, I can kind of see it happening. But being that I'm not the biggest fan of Baker Mayfield, I think he somewhat kind of sucks. And, I think that Tommy DeVito still doesn't have, 7 or 8 games played. It's still a spicy take there. So definitely a milk jug there to it being spiciest. So, definitely some habanero there. But this is like that mango habanero that you can kind of take for a second. You can eat 2 or 3, maybe 4. But, after the 5th one, you're definitely chewing on ice cubes for sure.
Yeah, Dwayne Nation. I mean, that's perfect. I don't know. This week is pretty tame. I think we've done pretty good though. I'm feeling good about our takes this week. As we'll transition on our next episode to starts and sits of the week and game predictions. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for listening. Bold predictions in the books for week 12 of the NFL season. I mean, I think it's this week, next week, and the next week, and we're in the playoffs for fantasy football. So this is when we got to focus in. We got to lock in. And we're here to help you guys do so. So thank you guys for listening. And Jano, send us out.
Yo, Dewey Nation, this was our bold picks of the week. where we get spicy, spicier, and spiciest there. I'm going to have to get some wings. Shout out to Buffalo Wild Wings there. And so thank you guys for watching. We love you guys. And as always, peace.
Peace.